Wild Willie here. It's been a few minutes back again. What happened was, I made a video and I got a fair amount of views on it in 1 or 2 days. More than I've ever gotten on any of my other videos. And what happened was I got nervous. I got anxious. I started thinking, I said, I got to be able, if I'm going to get more people watching my channel, watching my videos, I have to be able to come up with something that's really good. I have to make better quality content. I have to come up with something really great. So it's been a minute since I've made a video because I've been thinking, I spent a lot of time trying to think about some cool new way to share truth with you guys. And then when I was thinking about this, I had a realization. And the realization was, the more time that I spend thinking about truth, the less time I'm able to put into actually experiencing truth. And that was my realization. And the realization I had is going to be the basis for the first part of this video, entitled the last block to enlightenment. And then I want to segue out of that and into something different, like dream explorations, just for fun. But, so I had this realization, and then I was it was so clear to me that thinking was the problem. I'm thinking about a way to present information. And in thinking about this, I am not experiencing reality. That was my realization. And it was so clear to me that thinking creates beliefs. Beliefs rooted in truth, because we all have our own truths based off of our thoughts, our beliefs, our experiences, right? And thinking goes to the beliefs. Beliefs go to the sense of self. And the sense of self is what separates us all from experiencing reality. So that was kind of what I arrived at. And when I arrived at this realization, I didn't want to make any more videos. I didn't want to come up with any new chakra models. I didn't want to have any more boards or pictures. I wanted to devote more of my time to experiencing this moment. That's what I wanted to do. So I haven't made a video in some time. The other day, I was, working on one of my projects, and the algorithms on the internet gave me Ken Wilbur. So I watched a Ken Wilbur video. If you haven't watched or heard of this guy, he's got some cool stuff going on. And he's been working on a model or a theory or whatever. And in this theory, it's for intellectual and spiritual development. And what he basically says is that there's two types of spirituality. There's spiritual understanding, and then there's spiritual experiences. And he's classified stages in each one. And he talks about how they're interrelated. And so it's interesting. He says, once you get to the top level of spiritual understanding, right? And he talks about the top level, and he talks about what it looks like. And at a certain point, it's interesting when you start thinking about these stages. In my own view, segueing out and then the segue back in, spiritual understanding is left brain. Spiritual experiences is right brain. This is it, right? This mastery of each compartments of this brain, this body, this organism, right? This sperm, a head and a tail, the spinal cord. But it's interesting to hear the stages. It really is. So I think mastery of one only leads to the mastery of the other, even though they are interconnected. And he explains that. I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video, because, oh my gosh, that is the paradigm we all need to be thinking about. And we all need to be seeing our world through, is this model that this man has spent his life researching and working on developing, because it's awesome and it's incredible. But I bring that up because he's talking about direct experience, and he's talking about direct experience. And he makes some interesting claims in the video, one of which is that you can have a spiritual awakening experience or some type of spiritual experience, but if you don't have a spiritual understanding, the way you talk about it or express that spiritual experience is going to be crude. That's one of the things he says. It's interesting. It's so interesting. But this realization that I had, that I talked about just a few moments ago, was, I don't know, maybe a month ago, a few weeks ago. And I just saw this video yesterday. And so it kind of inspired me to get into gear to make this video that I'm making right now, talking about my realization and then talking about why I don't want to talk about truth anymore. Because when I talk about truth, in a sense, I do inspire others or help other people to develop their own spiritual understanding. So it's not all bad, but I take away from my own spiritual development in that I remove myself from directly experiencing truth, directly experiencing this present moment. And it all has to do with controlling the attention and controlling the attention on yourself in the dimensions of mind, body, or actions, right? In the dimension of action, which is where most of us start, we can look at the results of our action, the karma. You can look at karma, and you can examine your karma from your own experience, and that will lead to spiritual understanding and spiritual experience. Well, not necessarily spiritual experience, but spiritual understanding, okay? Let me get to that one in a minute. It will lead to spiritual understanding. If you examine the results of your actions, your karma, you'll have a spiritual understanding. The second level that we can examine ourselves on to gain spiritual understanding is to examine our thoughts. And you can examine your thoughts in two dimensions. And the first dimension that we examine our thoughts in when we begin self-inquiry, you can examine the content of your thoughts, or you can examine the nature of your thoughts. And we all start off examining the content of our thoughts. And if we're able to weed through the content of our thoughts, examining the content, we can gain insight into truths and principles. And those truths and those principles will lead us to spiritual understanding. Some of us are not as skilled in examining the contents of thinking. So that can be a problem area. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying some people are more skilled in that area of examination. It's more of an orientation thing, I think. But at a certain point, you have to start examining the nature of thoughts. The content will only take you to the principles of truth. And then everything else is extraneous. And at some point, that must be realized so a person can start examining the nature of the thoughts. Okay? Or you can examine your physicality. And that is the one that is most rooted in direct experience. Okay? So that is the whole flow of self-examination. You can examine your actions, your thoughts, either the content of your thoughts or the nature of thinking, or you can examine your physical body. You examine your physical body, the sensations on your physical body. You give attention, you control the attention, you direct the attention to the physicality of your body, and you examine yourself. What is this structure? That is all of self-inquiry. And self-inquiry will take a person to spiritual understanding. And spiritual understanding is related to spiritual experience. It is not necessarily spiritual experience, but it is related to spiritual experience in that it is a reflection of the experience. And they work together. At a certain point, both must be mastered. If you master one, you must master the other one. Spiritual experience is different. A lot of times, if you're doing self-examination, depending on what it is you are doing, you are creating an environment for a spiritual experience to occur. Because you're doing something, right? And if you're doing something, it is likely and probable you will experience something. And it might be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If it's more pleasant than unpleasant or neutral, it's going to be spiritual, basically. And what is a spiritual experience? At first, when we start out, we have to do really radical things to have a spiritual experience, because basically a spiritual experience is an experience that is so shocking it removes you out of yourself. It takes you out of yourself, okay? My ability to talk about this is spiritual understanding, but the spiritual understanding is based off of spiritual experience. And spiritual understanding should always take a person to the removal or lowering of a self, because at the heart of the self is attachment, and attachment is the seed for craving and aversion, and craving and aversion are the seeds for misery. Okay? So a message of spiritual understanding should always be pointing towards the removal of a self. In Christianity, lower yourself, humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Buddhism, no, there's no permanent soul, self, or ego. Okay? When we look at chakras, or when we're looking at mechanisms, there's no I in that. It's karmic. It's cause and effect. Okay? So a good spiritual teaching or a presentation of spiritual understanding should always take a person away out of themselves. It should be directing towards self, away from self. Sorry. Sometimes we have to build a self up in order to see the falseness in it, right? But that can be very confusing, right? So that's kind of, this understanding is kind of something that's pushing me out of this type of content, or talking about truth, and not pointing you all directly towards experience, even though they're both connected and they're both important. But when we start out with spiritual experiences, something radical at first is so helpful because it takes us out of ourselves. If you go to another country, you travel to another place, I mean, it's shocking. It's so shocking. It shocks the system, and there's no room for you anymore. That's radical. Over time, spiritual experiences, they don't need to be so radical, because we gain the spiritual understanding that allows us to see that, myself is the problem. This image of me is the problem. And so we can go from having to do all these crazy, radical, extreme things to a realization of, I can have a spiritual experience in every moment of my life only by controlling my attention and giving all importance to my experience right now. I'm sitting here, I'm talking, I'm allowing words to come out of my mouth. This is my experience. This can be a spiritual experience if and only if I'm paying attention to the degree in which myself is removed. And then I can have a spiritual experience. You see? So principles and truths in principles are at the root of all spiritual understanding, and all spiritual understanding should point to the truth in that there is no permanent self, which is the problem. It really is. And then on the other hand, all spiritual experience should be taking you to a place of realization that this moment is the solution, and my direct experience of this moment is the solution, which is also the absence of self. Right? There is no self in observing. Right? So what is this pointing to? I already said it. This is pointing to the realization that thinking, the expression of craving, aversion, attachment, my ego, my identity, is all rooted in thoughts. Because when I think about my truths. I think about my understanding. I think about my spiritual understanding based on my experiences. It's all rooted in subject and object Thinking is duality. Right? So thinking. End thinking. Stop thinking. And start observing. Start experiencing. And that's the way out. And that's the way to mature and develop both spiritual understanding and spiritual experience. And life is the arena that we get to do this in, right? So, based on the Ken Wilbur talk I watched and my experience of trying to think about a really excellent model of truth that I could share with people as this channel grows, my takeaway is I don't need to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to spend more of my time residing in presence for my own personal development. And I want to point towards presence for people watching so they can see, oh yes, this is the end result of that. This is the end result of that. You have to traverse a whole bunch of stuff, but this is the end result of that. And so, I don't know if I'm going to keep going because, Eckhart Tolle, he says it. He says it best. He is actualized. He's in presence. He talks. He's in presence. Go listen to him. You don't need to listen to me, right? That's kind of where I'm at. But having some ambivalence as far as what's going to happen with this channel and my content that I'm making on this channel, that I have been making over the past, nearly 2 years. It was kind of cool for me yesterday as I was planning this video to think about something that I would like to talk about today, and that's something that's kind of unreal. And really, this could be its own separate video, but I'm going to wrap it into this video because I want to, and because I can. And that's dreams. Because if I'm not going to talk about truth, I'm going to talk about the unknown. And what better medium to talk about than dreams? That is unknown, because we love dreams. People throughout history have examined dreams, and we're fascinated by them. There is some significance to dreams. And so I said, as a way to possibly end the content of this channel, it would be cool to dispel the need to talk about truth and talk about something unreal. Have a need to dispel talking about the real and end it with talking about something unreal. Something that is real, but there's no truth in it. And that's by looking at dreams. And over the past 2 years, I've had some of the craziest dreams I've ever had. And I'd like to share with you 3 of my dreams, and I'd like to present evidence that suggests the origin and purpose for dreams, all conflicting. Okay? So this is what I want to do. It will be really fun, I think. So I watch, you guys, if you've watched my channel, I watch I do Christian research, I do Buddhism research, I do New Age, energetic, spiritual research. I like it all. I do psychology research. I love this stuff. So there's all these different explanations for the meaning of dreams and the purpose of dreams. Okay? So I had a dream 2 nights ago. Okay? And anyways, before I jump into that, everybody says they all have different explanations for dreams. It could be spiritual, could be physical, could be energetic, could be whatever, right? So I had a dream 2 nights ago, and this dream was a nightmare. And I've had nightmares similar to this dream before, where a common one I used to have occasionally was, I drove drunk and I killed somebody, and then I was going to go to prison, right? And so this nightmare I had last night was really similar to that type of nightmare. I had killed somebody in my dream, and I was going to go to prison, right? It's basically the same dream. But the thing about this nightmare I had 2 nights ago was, instead of, having the dream be, continually morphing and evolving from theme to theme, this was the same theme. There were some changes, and the dream did have a flow of evolution, but it was all tied into this theme of me having to forsake my life because I killed this person and I was going to go to prison for the rest of my life. At first, I was going to go to prison for the rest of for a long time, and then I killed somebody, and then I was going to go to prison for my whole entire life, like a life sentence. And then it was like my mom, but it wasn't my mom. You know how that is. And they were going to we were gonna flee, but they got this car, and the car couldn't even hardly run. It was like all broke down and stuff. And like I was going to prison, and the feeling in my body, this was like it was like an hour long. I was dreaming, and I was in this for like an hour. It was so long, and the feeling was so much fear and anxiety, and like I just had to lay down. I just had to sacrifice my life. Like my life was, it was like ego death, but it was like, yeah, and it was awful. It was just, the feeling in my body was awful. It was terrible. And so I woke up. I went to bed real late. I woke up real early, and I couldn't even hardly open my eyes. And I grabbed my phone. I'm going to the bathroom, and I'm Googling, right? What is the meaning of killing somebody in a dream and prison for life? And I'm reading, and like the answers are crazy. They're like so weird. It's like content. It's like examining the dream thoughts from a perspective of content. And it was like, it means that you are going to have good things happen. It was like all this crazy stuff. I'm like, this is crazy. So I'm like, enough of this. So I lay back down, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, let's think about the feelings in my body. It was terrible. And I was like, well, the feeling and the idea of having to give my life up, because that's basically, I was giving my freedom up in this dream, like by going to prison, right? I did something and I had to forfeit my life. It was just felt so stressful. And in examining my karma, right, the karmic situation around this is, well, this is kind of the past. This is kind of my past 2 to 5 years, 5 to 2 years, whatever, right? This is kind of been my experience right here. And so I said, okay, one physical theory they have about dreams, or one physical thing I've heard about dreams, is that when you sleep, it allows your central nervous system or your brain to process experiences, kind of like clean out your central nervous system a little bit, right? And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Like this could just be my central nervous system kind of purging some of my past experiences. And then it comes out in the expression of some movies I kind of watched, kind of similar movies. And I'm thinking, okay, this makes sense. Okay. So I kind of thinking like that. I'm laying there, I'm thinking this. I'm saying, okay, that makes sense. And then another conceptualization I have about this dream is that, I've been told I have sleep apnea, right? So it's possible I just wasn't breathing for an hour. And in not breathing for an hour while I'm sleeping, I can feel this cortisol rushing through my body, and the mental expression of this physical response, right, is just struggling for life. Like I'm like, oh, that makes sense too. I could definitely see that. So I fell back asleep, and that's kind of where I ended with that. And so that's one iteration of a dream where there's a lot of evidence that says, hey, look, like this is just karmic. It's a response. It's cause and effect. It's a reaction. And I say, oh, yeah, that's cool. Psychology world, they think all about content, and they love dreams. And so you think, oh, yeah, this doesn't mean anything, right? So, but I had another dream about a week or two ago. And, we've all had these dreams where stuff happens like that coincide with time outside of the dream in waking world. And that's the craziest stuff. That's where you can't explain that physically. That's where it gets a little bit deeper into the spiritual realm. Like, you're waiting for somebody to call you on the phone, and then the phone rings and wakes you up because the phone is ringing. And it's like, how is it synced? How is it time synced like that? So I had a dream, not quite the same, but kind of similar. And I told you I watch a lot of Christian stuff, and the Christian in Christian thinking, it's spiritual attacks, spiritual warfare, spirit realm, sleeping, visions. That's kind of significant there. So I had another dream about 2 weeks ago, another nightmare. And I'm at a Buddhist monastery, and I'm kind of a Buddhist. You guys know that. And there's a woman there, and she's trying to seduce me. She's trying to seduce me at this Buddhist monastery. And so I have respect for Buddhist monasteries, and I have respect for Buddhism, and you're not supposed to do that. And in this dream, I'm resisting this woman's attempts at seducing me, at tempting me, right? And it's like in the Christian paradigm, it made me think of the biblical verse, resist the devil and he will flee you. And, this is a demon spiritually attacking me, right? In the spirit realm of my dream, right? These are my thoughts. And so I'm resisting this woman and her attempts at seducing me. And finally she walks off. And my neighbor, he's got these 3 barking dogs, and they're huge, and they're loud, and they're mean. And they lock them in this room all day, every day. And they're freaky. And as she's walking away, she walks away, she's out of my sight, the dogs go off. They start barking. And in my twilight reverie, as I'm waking up to these dogs barking, my understanding is that there was a demon attacking me. And I was resisting the demon, the devil, whatever it was, and it went into the dogs. It was floating above my head, and I resisted it. I wouldn't let it in, and it went into the dogs. So that speaks more to a more spiritual conceptualization of the significance and meaning of dreams, right? There's some evidence there. Not as good as the phone call example, but this was a real dream, and that's what I really felt when I had that dream. Okay, so and then the final example I have of a dream, which speaks to the strongest degree of a spiritual or energetic or astral reality to dreaming, right? Is at a 10-day Vipassana meditation camp course. I was sleeping. I can't remember, 3 or 4 days into the 10-day course, right? You'd meditate all day long. I was sleeping, and I was looking at my body sleeping all night long. I was aware of the dreams that the body was having. I was aware of what side I was laying on, the position of my body. And some part of me was watching me. Like I had an astral what do they call that? An astral projection experience of me watching myself sleep and dream at the same time. Speaking as evidence to probably the most energetic level or the reality or possible phenomenon of dreaming. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's all 3, maybe it's 1, maybe this is just all made up, but I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to share this with you all because some things you can know, some things you experience, some things you can know, some things you can experience, and some things you just can't know. You can experience and not know. And it's kind of fun and it's kind of cool, and I don't know, I wanted to talk about it. So anyways, wow, Willie here. Hope you're all having a wonderful day out there in TV land. And if we never meet again, or if we do meet again, until the next time we do, wow, Willie out of here.